In this lecture, we're going to focus on introducing the lymphatic system and body defenses, or the immune system. We'll start with the lymph system. So the lymphatic system consists of two kind of semi-independent parts. There's the lymphatic vessels that go around your body, similar to the way that a blood vessel would, and then there's also lymph tissue and organs. Lymphatic system functions include transporting escaped fluids back to the blood, because fluid can escape the bloodstream and pool in areas of your body, like in your ankles and things like that. That's why sometimes they swell in the afternoon if you've been sitting a lot or not very mobile. And then the lymph system also plays an essential role in body defenses or immunity and the resistance to disease. Lymph is a fluid that's in your body. It's excess tissue fluid, and it's carried inside of your lymphatic vessels. The properties of your lymphatic vessels include one-way travel towards the heart. There is no pump in the lymph, so it moves towards the heart through milking action by your skeletal muscle and also rhythmic contraction of smooth muscle in the vessel walls. And so it returns to the heart more slowly than blood typically, because there's not a big pump like the heart. So in this diagram, you can see kind of how the lymph system and the cardiovascular system work together. So fluid can leak out of the cardiovascular system, particularly where you have connective tissue around the blood capillaries. And so you can see that's sort of down in this region, right? And as that fluid leaks out, it's collected by the lymph capillaries. And the lymph capillaries do take things back to the heart, but a little bit more slowly. So fluid travels one direction through lymph capillaries. It goes towards the heart, as you can see, kind of indicated by these little black arrows here. And as the fluid moves through, it's milked by skeletal muscle, and then it also has valves. So you can see the valves that are here, and those prevent backflow. So there's valves in the collecting vessels within the lymph system, and that means that fluid can travel one direction but not the other direction. And then it will also travel through lymph nodes, and then eventually as it gets towards the heart, you have the lymph trunk and the lymph duct, which are slightly larger vessels that return blood or fluid to the venous blood flow, and then it eventually goes to the heart, and so it restores fluid to the blood volume. So first we'll talk about the lymph capillaries. The lymph capillaries have walls that overlap, and they form kind of flap-like mini valves. And so fluid is allowed to leak into lymph capillaries, so they're not completely watertight essentially, because you do need fluid to filter in. The capillaries are anchored to connective tissue by structures called filaments. And then there's higher pressure on the inside than there is on the outside, and so that pushes those mini valves closed. That pressure helps to hold the valves closed so that fluid doesn't leak out of the lymph capillaries. And then fluid is forced along the vessel. So here you can see a slightly closer view of how lymph vessels pick up fluid from your tissues. So again, fluid can leach out of your blood vessels, particularly the capillaries. That's where most of that fluid loss occurs. And then fluid can be picked up by the lymph capillaries. Here you can see these little black arrows are kind of showing where fluid will enter those capillaries. And then that can be taken towards the heart. And you can also see structurally there's not as much fluid that's lost by like the arterioles. Those are slightly large, or those are the smallest arteries, and venules, which are the smallest veins. It's really the exchange beds of the capillaries where fluid is lost. And if we zoom in even closer to those lymph capillaries, you can see how the cells are sort of overlaid on top of one another like shingles. You can see kind of the joint between two cells there. So fluid is able to leach into the capillary, but from the inside there's a little bit of pressure, and more fluid pressure than there is on the outside. So that's going to push against those little kind of valves or flaps, and that's going to prevent the fluid from leaking out of the capillary. The capillaries lead to lymphatic collecting vessels. So they collect lymph from the lymph capillaries, and then they carry lymph to and away from the lymph nodes. They also return fluid to the circulatory veins, which is near the heart. And so that occurs at the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. And in this diagram, you can see where the lymph is returned to the circulatory system. So there's the entrance of the right lymphatic duct into the right subclavian vein that occurs here, and then the thoracic duct that enters to the left subclavian vein is here. The lymph vessels also allow some harmful materials to enter, and that allows it to present things to the immune system. So bacteria can be circulating in the lymph system, as well as viruses, cancer cells, and cell debris. As the lymph travels through lymph nodes, they're filtered. So lymph nodes filter the lymph before it's returned to the bloodstream. And there are defense cells that are within the lymph nodes. So you've got macrophages, and their job is to engulf and destroy foreign substances. So they're able to detect things that shouldn't be there, like bacteria, viruses, and anything like that. And then lymphocytes provide immune responses to antigens. So antigens are anything that elicit an immune response. So we'll look at this diagram with new labels. Here you can see where some of your lymph nodes are located. So you have like cervical lymph nodes in the neck region, axillary lymph nodes, those are in the armpit region, and then inguinal lymph nodes, which are in like the groin area. Most lymph nodes are kind of kidney shaped, and they're about an inch long. They have two parts. There's the cortex, which is the outer part, so that contains follicles, which are collections of lymphocytes. And then in the medulla, that's the inner part of the lymph node, and they contain phagocytic macrophages. Phagocytic macrophages are able to surround foreign objects and digest them. So here you can see the general structure of a lymph node. So the cortex, again, is that outermost layer, so that's going to be the external surface. And then the follicles are those structures on the inside. And then leading to a lymph node, you have the afferent vessels, so those carry lymph into a lymph node, and then the efferent vessels carry lymph away from a lymph node. As lymph flows through a lymph node, it follows a predictable journey. So lymph enters the convex side through the afferent lymphatic vessels, and then the lymph flows through a number of sinuses or open spaces inside of the lymph node, and then the lymph exits through the efferent lymphatic vessels. And then there's fewer efferent than afferent vessels, and this generally causes the flow of the fluid to be slowed a little bit, which helps to maintain pressure inside of the vessels in the system so that water does not leak out of the lymph system. There are several other organs that also are involved in lymphatic function, and they include the spleen, the thymus, the tonsils, and the Peyer's patches. So in this diagram, you can see where some of those things are located, right? So here we have the tonsils. So they surround kind of the oral cavity. They're located in the pharyngeal region. And then there's the thymus, that's located in the thorax. That's most active during youth. And then the spleen, which is the organ that curves around the side of the stomach. And then the Peyer's patches are found in the intestines. And then finally the appendix, and that hangs off of part of the large intestine. So the spleen is located on the left side of the abdomen, and its function is mainly to filter blood. It destroys worn out blood cells, and then it also helps with blood cell formation in a fetus before there's enough red marrow, which is usually blood cells are formed in bone. And so it helps with blood cell production until there's enough red marrow to make that process viable. And it also acts as a blood reservoir, so blood cells can be stored in the spleen. The thymus gland is located low in the throat, and it overlays the heart. It's kind of on top of those structures. Its functions are most peak during childhood, but its job is to produce hormones like thymosin and to help to program lymphocytes. So it helps to make immune cells more functional. The tonsils are small masses of lymphoid tissue, and they're around the pharynx. So their job is to trap and remove bacteria and other foreign materials, typically that enter through the nose and the mouth. And if you have a lot of congestion with bacteria of the tonsils, then you can have tonsillitis. Sometimes people have tonsils removed if you have chronic inflammation that's interfering with breathing. The Peyer's patches are found in the walls, again, of the small intestine. They resemble tonsils in their structure, and they have a similar function. They capture and destroy bacteria that's found in the intestine. Some of these tissues are what we call mucosa-associated lymphatic tissues, and those are tissues that are available to things that are from the outside of the body, because you have a tube that runs the length of your body from your mouth and all the way through. It's your digestive system, but that is open to the outside world. So the Peyer's patches, the tonsils, and other small accumulations of tissue that are in like the respiratory and digestive tract are kind of the sentinels to outside foreign invaders, because coming in through your nose and mouth is the easiest way for a pathogen to enter your body. It's a lot harder for it to get through skin and structures like that. So these particular lymph tissues are sort of the first line of defense once something has entered your body. Our bodies are constantly in contact with foreign things like bacteria and fungi and viruses, so it's something we encounter every minute of every day. So we have two different defense systems that we use to deal with foreign material. So there's the innate or non-specific defense system, and then the adaptive or specific defense system. And then immunity is when we have specific resistance to a disease. So we can develop immunity if we have been exposed to something previously. So this table summarizes the immune system. So we've got innate immunity, which is non-specific. Those are the things that are able to keep pathogens out of our body or eliminate them without having a specific response. So your skin, for example, does a great job of keeping things out by being a physical barrier. We also have things like phagocytic cells. Their job is to locate something inside of the body that's not supposed to be there and then surround it and digest it. Adaptive or specific defenses mean that we can become immune to specific pathogens, and so that's the third line of defense, and it includes things like lymphocytes and antibodies. So the innate or non-specific system protects us against a variety of different invaders, and it responds immediately to protect us from foreign materials. The adaptive defense system or specific immunity is required for each type of invader. And so you've got kind of the first response team, that's your innate immunity, and then the specific response team, which can go after individual targets with the adaptive defense system. So again, your innate body defenses are things like your surface coverings, which include intact skin and mucous membranes. Mucous membranes are like the linings of your organs, like your mouth, your esophagus, your lungs, your small intestine, large intestine. And then there's also specialized cells that can help with this process. And then certain chemicals produced by the body are toxic to foreign pathogens, whether it's bacteria or viruses. And so they can also help to control populations of unwanted visitors. Your skin and your mucous membranes provide a physical barrier to foreign materials, and they can also provide protective secretions. So for example, the pH, or the kind of acidity or basicity of your skin, it's actually acidic, and that inhibits bacterial growth. So you have bacteria on your skin, but your skin is able to limit the amount of bacteria by being slightly acidic. You also have sebum that's produced by your sebaceous glands, and that's toxic to bacteria, so they are not able to survive those encounters. And then in women, vaginal secretions are very acidic, which also prevents the growth of a lot of pathogens like bacteria. You also have surface membranes like your stomach mucosa. That secretes hydrochloric acid, which is extremely acidic, like a pH of like a 1 or a 2. And it has protein digesting enzymes, and so that is also able to break down unwanted things like some types of viruses. And then saliva and lacrimal fluid. Remember, your lacrimal gland is the fluid on your eye, or where that comes from. So saliva is in your mouth, lacrimal fluid is on your eyes. They both contain lysosomes, and those are enzymes that destroy bacteria. And then you've got mucus in your airway that can, and digestive system that can trap microorganisms before they can get to some place where they can cause an infection.